The bounty notice hit the mud at Elias Dawson's feet before he even had time to look up from the rear hoof of Captain Varen's gray gelding. 3 men stood in the arched entrance of the old fort's stable block, the one in the middle holding a rolled parchment like it was a weapon. The stable smelled of iron and hay and horse sweat, and Elias had been working since before dawn. His leather apron dark with soot from the portable forge, he dragged all the way from the central courtyard when the rain started. He set the gelding's hoof down slowly, straightened his back, and looked at the parchment in the mud without picking it up. "You're Dawson," the middle man said, not a question. He had the look of a guild bounty man, padded coat, short sword, the kind of flat eyes that came from years of chasing people across hard country. The farrier they pulled out of Ashfeld to shoe the Ironwall cavalry's horses. "That's me," Elias said. He was 31 years old, lean and weathered in the way of men who worked outdoors with their hands, with dark hair that needed cutting and a 3-day beard that never quite decided to become anything more. He was not remarkable to look at. He knew this about himself the way a man knows the weight of a tool he carries every day. "What do you need?" "Nothing from you," the bounty man said. "From the orc woman. Word as she came through the eastern pass 3 days ago. Word as she was seen talking to a farrier at the resettlement post." He finally looked at the notice on the ground, then back up at Elias with a pointed expression. "That would be you." Elias did not answer immediately. He picked up his hammer from the forge ledge, turned it in his hands the way a man does when he is thinking rather than threatening, and said, "I talk to a lot of people. It's a resettlement. Everybody passes through." "Her name is Ugak Gorehorn," the bounty man said, and the name landed in the stable like a stone dropped into still water. "She is wanted in Crestmere for the killing of a wool merchant named Fossick. There is a 30 crown price on her. She is dangerous, she is armed, and if you are hiding her or helping her, you will be considered an accessory under the Ironwall Resettlement Charter." He tapped his coat where the charter mark was stitched. "I suggest you think very carefully about your answer." Elias set the hammer down. He crouched, picked up the muddy parchment, and unrolled it. The sketch inside was rough charcoal lines suggesting sharp tusks, heavy brows, a coil of dark hair bound back. But even in bad light, even crudely drawn, it was unmistakably her. The woman he had met exactly once 6 weeks ago, before the fort's resettlement had properly gotten underway, on a morning when the whole world had seemed very wide and very empty and very cold. He remembered her stumbling. He remembered not laughing. He rolled the parchment back up and handed it to the bounty man. "I haven't seen her," he said. "Good luck in the pass." The 3 men left. Elias stood for a long moment in the stable, alone with the horse and the rain drumming on the roof, and he thought about the woman in the sketch, and he thought about 30 crowns, and he thought about what the word of a farrier was worth against the word of a bounty charter in a newly resettled fort at the edge of the known map. Then he picked up his hammer and went back to work, because he had 8 horses left to shoe, and the cavalry didn't care about a man's troubled thoughts. But Ugak Gorehorn did not leave his mind. He had come to Fort Ashfin, the renamed ruin the Ironwall cavalry was busy transforming from a crumbling stone skeleton into a functioning outpost, 5 weeks before the bounty men showed up. He'd come because the work was good and regular, and because Ashfeld, the town he'd spent the previous 4 years in, had grown small around him in ways he couldn't quite name. The cavalry needed a farrier who could work fast and work alone, and Elias could do both. Fort Ashfin sat at the edge of a wide valley where 2 old roads met, the mountains at its back and the frontier plains rolling away to the south. The walls were being rebuilt stone by stone. The inner buildings were being patched and replastered. A permanent well had been dug. A market square was being cleared from rubble. There were soldiers and masons and traders and settlers all crammed into a place that was half ruin and half living town, and the noise and the energy of it suited something in Elias' blood, though he would not have said so aloud. He had first seen Ugak Gorehorn on the morning of his 3rd week at the fort, before the outer gate had even been fully rebuilt. She had come up the road from the east at dawn, alone and on foot, carrying a pack that was larger than most men could have managed without a cart. She wore fitted warrior's leathers dark brown and deep green, molded close to her strong frame, with a wide belt cinched at the waist over a sleeveless tunic of rough-spun linen, lace-up bracers running up her forearms, and tall boots buckled at the ankle and knee. The leathers were well-made but road-worn, patched at one shoulder, and there was a short blade at her hip and a longer one strapped across her back. Her dark hair was coiled and pinned behind her head with what looked like a carved bone pin, and her skin was the deep weathered green-gray of deep forest orcs, her tusks small and upswept, her eyes a fierce and startling amber. She was, in the plain and simple way of the word, magnificent, and she walked like she knew it, and like it was not something she needed anyone else to confirm. Elias had been crossing the courtyard with a bucket of water for the forge when it happened. She had been picking her way through the rubble near the unfinished gatehouse, where a scatter of old stone blocks lay half buried in the mud. Her boot caught on the edge of one of those blocks, a thing that could happen to anyone, and which said nothing about a person except that the ground was treacherous. And she went down on one knee hard, her pack lurching forward, her free hand shooting out to catch herself in the mud. Around her, 3 or 4 of the resettlement workers stopped and stared. One of them, a young mason's apprentice who did not yet know enough about the world to know when to keep his mouth shut, let out a short, sharp laugh. Another made a muttered comment to his companion that Elias did not hear clearly but understood by the type of smile it produced. Elias set his bucket down and crossed the courtyard. He did not laugh. It did not even occur to him to laugh. He crossed the courtyard and crouched next to her, and he said, without ceremony or pity, "That block's been catching people all week. We should have moved it days ago." She had looked up at him slowly. He remembered that look with perfect precision, even 6 weeks later, the amber eyes flicking up to meet his, searching for mockery, finding none, the slight hardening of her jaw that was not coldness but wariness, the exact kind of wariness of a person who has been laughed at enough times that kindness arrives as a surprise they don't yet trust. "I am fine," she said. Her voice was low and even and carried no inflection of embarrassment, only a careful neutrality. "I know you are," he said simply. He reached down and offered his hand not to pull her up. She was already rising under her own considerable power, but as a gesture, the same gesture he would have offered any traveler who caught a bad stone in a bad courtyard. She looked at his hand for a moment. Then she took it briefly and let it go. "Thank you," she said, and the words came out slow and deliberate, like they had been considered before being spoken, and he had the distinct sense that they were not words she said often or easily. "Elias Dawson," he said, "the farrier." "Ugak Gorehorn," she said, and looked at him as if waiting for a reaction to the name. He did not have one. He picked up his bucket and said, "Are you staying or passing through?" She had paused just a beat, a fraction of a moment, as if no one had asked her that with genuine neutrality before. Then she said, "Staying, for a time." He had nodded and gone on to the forge, and she had gone on to wherever she was going, and that had been the whole of it. The whole of the beginning of everything. In the weeks that followed, he had learned things about her in the way you learn things about people in a place that is small and busy at once. She had taken work as a contract scout, hired by the fort's newly appointed commander, a capable woman named Captain Myra Yold, to map the pass routes and check for old clan territories that the resettlement might inadvertently disturb. It was solitary work that suited her, and she was gone for 2 or 3 days at a stretch, returning with maps drawn in a sure hand and reports that were precise and brief. The soldiers respected her work and kept their distance from her person, which was the arrangement she seemed to prefer. Elias respected her work too, from a distance, and he did not press his advantage from that first morning. He wasn't even sure what advantage it was, except that she had said thank you to him in a way that suggested she remembered it, because the second time they ended up near each other, at the communal fire where the resettlement workers ate their evening meals. She had sat down 2 feet away from him without the careful buffer space she maintained with everyone else, and that had felt like something. The third time, she had watched him work. He had been shoeing a difficult cavalry mare, a red roan with opinions about strangers, and Ugak had appeared at the stable doorway the way a person does when they are not trying to hide that they are watching, but also not announcing themselves. Elias had glanced up once, registered her, and gone back to coaxing the mare's trust, which was a slow and patient process involving low talking and the careful reading of an animal's breathing. When he finally had the mare calm and the shoe set, he looked up again and found Ugak still there. "You are very patient," she said. "Horses need it more than people do," he said. "They can't tell you what they're afraid of." She had come inside then, slowly, the way a person does who is uncertain whether they are welcome but will not show that uncertainty as anything other than a deliberate pace. She stopped a few feet from the mare and held out her hand, knuckles up, and the red roan stretched her neck forward and sniffed at the orc woman's fingers and then blew out a long breath and relaxed. "She likes you," Elias said, a little surprised. "Horses know who is not afraid of them," Ugak said, "and who is not afraid of themselves." He had looked at her then, really looked, and found her looking back in a way that made the stable feel smaller than it was. That was 3 weeks before the bounty men arrived. In those 3 weeks they had talked. Not constantly, not in the open pouring out way of people who are lonely and eager, but in the careful, considered way of people who are not used to being heard, and are therefore precise about what they say. She told him about her clan's territory in the northern crags, about the death of her mother 3 years ago, about the strange piece of map-making because the land did not care what you were. He told her about Ashfeld and the 4 years that had grown too small, about the satisfaction of a well-set shoe, about the way a horse's personality lived in its hooves if you knew how to read them. They did not speak about whatever was growing between them, because neither of them was the type to name a thing before it was ready to be named, but it was there, and they both knew it, and the knowing of it was already more than either of them had had in a long time. The night before the bounty men arrived, they had been sitting outside the stable on an old mounting block and a section of fallen wall respectively, passing a clay cup of spiced wine back and forth in the cool evening air, watching the resettlement workers move around the lantern-lit courtyard, and she had laughed at something he said, a low, brief sound like a stone skipping on water, and he had felt something rearrange itself in his chest with the quiet finality of furniture being moved into its proper place. Then the morning came, and the parchment in the mud, and the name said like a weapon, and everything changed shape. He finished the last of the cavalry horses just before midday, and he went looking for her. He found her at the south wall, where she had been helping reinforce a crumbling section by carrying stones that 3 men would have struggled with together, her pack set against the base of the wall, her bone-pinned hair dark against the gray stone. She was talking to one of the masons in the easy, brief way she talked to people she found competent. When she saw Elias' face, she stopped mid-sentence. "A moment," she said to the mason and came to Elias. Up close, he could see that she had already heard something, not everything, but enough. Her amber eyes were flat and watchful in the way of a person taking stock of available exits. "Bounty men," he said quietly. "3 of them from Cressmere, they're looking for you." "I know," she said. "They said a wool merchant, Fossick." Her jaw tightened. "Yes." "Did you kill him?" The amber eyes met his with the direct, unblinking quality of something that doesn't flinch. "He tried to press a slave contract on 4 orc workers under his employ, and when I objected he drew a knife. I defended myself. He lived." She paused. "He told the Cressmere Council that I attacked him without cause because a living orc woman is a better story than a dead wool merchant who got what he earned." Elias was quiet for a moment. The mason was pretending not to watch them from across the wall. "Can you prove it?" "The 4 workers could speak for me. 3 of them were sent to the Eastern Territories by Fossick after the incident. The 4th," she stopped. "The 4th died of fever 2 months ago." He felt the weight of that settle. A clean story, a false accusation, and all the witnesses scattered or gone. He knew how courts worked in the larger towns, how a bounty charter from a guild could override a resettlement commander's authority if the paperwork was in order, how orcs fared in human courtrooms even in the best circumstances, which these were not. "They'll be back," he said. "The charter gives them the right to search the fort." "I know. Then what are you going to do?" She looked at him for a long moment. The wind came off the mountains and moved a loose strand of her dark hair across her face. She did not push it back, and something about that small stillness made his chest tight. "I was going to leave," she said. "Tonight, take the North Pass and go back to the crags." He did not say anything immediately. He was aware that this was the moment a man with good sense would nod and say, "That sounded right," and then go back to his horses, and then tell himself later that 30 crowns was 30 crowns, and that a farrier at the edge of the map had no business in a bounty dispute. He was also aware that if she went back to the crags and the bounty men followed, which they would, because 30 crowns was 30 crowns, she would be caught on the road alone, and what happened to orc women caught alone by bounty men in the backcountry was not a thing he could make himself think about without something cold and hard forming in the middle of his chest. "Or," he said. She waited. "Or I know the 3 passes out of the valley, all of them. I've been riding supply runs for 6 weeks." He met her eyes. "And I know which one the bounty men will watch and which ones they won't, because they came from Crestmere, which means they came through the South Valley Road, which means they don't know the northern routes at all." She was very still. "You are a farrier," she said. "I am," he said. "This is not your trouble. I know that too." The silence between them had a quality to it that he could not have described in plain words, the quality of a rope bridge in wind, something taut and alive and moving. "Why?" she said, and the word was simple and direct and stripped of any softness that might have made it easier to answer falsely. He thought about the courtyard 3 weeks ago, and the mud, and the mason's apprentice's laugh, and the way her eyes had come up slowly to look at him. "Because you didn't deserve that laugh," he said, "and you don't deserve the bounty." She looked at him for a long time. Her expression was not soft. Ugak Gorehorn's face was not a face that did soft easily, and he had not been expecting soft. But something in the amber eyes shifted, the way deep water shifts when a current changes direction underneath. "All right, Elias Dawson," she said, and the way she said his name had a weight to it he felt in his spine. "Show me your northern route." They left before dawn the next morning. He had spent the previous afternoon quietly, not drawing attention, doing exactly what a farrier did, checking hooves, setting shoes, moving between the stables and the forge with the unremarkable rhythm of a working man doing his job. He had asked Captain Yold, on the pretext of a resupply question, whether the northern pass road was cleared above the tree line yet, and she had told him it was passable but rough, and then she had looked at him for a moment with the level gaze of a woman who was a commander because she understood people, and she had said nothing else. He chose to believe that was deliberate. Ugak had spent the afternoon the same way she spent every afternoon, working, visible, unhurried, and he had admired the nerve of that, the kind of nerve that didn't announce itself but simply existed as the way a person moved through the world. They met at the stable door an hour before first light. He had 2 horses, his own working mare, a steady brown called Birch, and a fort horse he had borrowed on the stated grounds of checking a loose shoe on the northern supply road, which was true, technically, because the horse did have a loose shoe that he intended to fix the moment they were clear of the valley. Ugak took the fort horse without comment, settling into the saddle with the ease of someone who had grown up at pace with animals, and they rode out through the half-finished gate in the dark, quiet as falling snow. For the first 2 hours they rode without speaking. The pass road climbed steeply through stands of black pine, and the cold came down off the mountain like a weight, and the sky went from black to iron gray to the pale, bruised blue of very early morning. Elias led and she followed, and he was aware of her behind him with the same awareness he had of a weather change coming, something in the air, something that made the back of his neck alert and present in a way it had not been in years. At the first rest point, where a frozen stream crossed the road, she came up beside him and they sat their horses side by side while the animals drank from a clear spot in the ice. "They will question you when you return," she said. "Probably," he agreed. "You could lose the contract, the cavalry contract." "Could." Elias, he looked at her. The morning light was coming in gray and clean through the pines, and it fell on her face in a way that made the amber of her eyes look almost gold. "I know what I'm doing," he said. "Do you?" "Ugak," he said, and using her name directly felt like touching something he'd been careful not to touch before, warm and real and deliberate. "I know what I'm doing." She held his gaze for a moment. Then she looked back at the stream, and after a pause she said, quietly and matter-of-factly, "I do not like owing debts to people." "You don't owe me anything," he said. "This isn't a debt." "Then what is it?" He looked at the frozen stream, at the way the ice caught the light, at the dark pines ranked in silence up the slope. He thought about 4 years in a town that grew small, and an empty evening that was just a little less empty when she sat 2 feet away at a communal fire, and a laugh like a stone on water. "Company," he said finally. "It's company." She was quiet for a long time. Then very softly, "I have not had much of that." "Neither have I." The horses finished drinking and they rode on. They were 2 hours deep into the pass, well above the tree line and moving through open rock country where the wind came sideways and the view back down the valley was wide and gray, when they heard the riders below. Elias heard them first, not the sound of them because they were too far down, but the way Birch's ears went forward and the fort horse tossed its head, and he turned to look back down the road. Far below, at the edge of the tree line, 3 dots were moving fast. "They found the route," Ugak said beside him. Her voice was entirely calm. "Someone must have told them." He scanned the rocks above. "There's a split in the road another half-mile up. One branch goes to the high pasture road which loops back south. They'll expect that one. The other goes east along the ridge and drops down into the veldt. I don't think they know the veldt route. Can we make the split before they reach us?" He looked at the dots, looked at the road above, looked at Ugak. "We can if we push," he said. She was already moving, heels into the fort horse's flanks, leaning forward, and the horse lunged into a gallop on a mountain road that was steep and loose-footed, and absolutely the wrong terrain for speed. He put his heels into Birch and followed, and for a quarter-mile they rode hard and desperate and brilliant on a road that wanted to kill them, stones skittering off the edge into the drop below, the wind screaming, and he could hear the distant thunder of the riders picking up pace when they saw them go. The split came around a blind corner. He nearly overshot it, and he hauled Birch left onto the veldt track, a narrow, half-hidden path between 2 granite outcroppings that vanished into the rock as cleanly as a secret. Ugak came around the corner a half-second behind him and took the turn without hesitation. And then they were both through the outcroppings, and the path narrowed, and the granite rose on either side of them, and the main road fell away and disappeared. They pushed the horses for another 10 minutes until the path widened onto a long shelf of rock above the veldt valley, and then he pulled Birch up and Ugak pulled up beside him, and they both sat there breathing hard, their horses heaving. The vast eastern valley spread below them in cold morning light. No pursuit. The rocks were silent. The path behind them was empty. He let out a long breath. She let out a long breath. They looked at each other. "You could have warned me about the corner," she said. "I nearly forgot about it myself," he said, a beat. And then she laughed, not the brief stone skip of the evening at the communal fire, but a real laugh, full and low and surprised out of her. And he found himself laughing too, which was not something he had done genuinely in longer than he could remember. And the sound of both of them laughing on a granite shelf in the cold above the world felt, improbably and exactly, like the best thing. They came down into the veldt valley by midday and rode east along the low river road, keeping off the main tracks. The veldt was old farmland, half abandoned, with scattered homesteads and overgrown field walls and the occasional small settlement. It was not cavalry country, and it was not bounty man country. It was the kind of country that minded its own business. They stopped at a wayfarer's shelter near a ford, a stone building, roofless but with walls intact and a fire ring in the center. And Elias fixed the fort horse's loose shoe, while Ugak made a fire from the dry wood stacked by previous travelers in the kind of unspoken wayfarer compact that held in hard country. She found water at the ford and set it to heat in the small iron pot from her pack, and added dried herbs and something from a folded cloth packet that smelled like bark in winter. He finished the shoe and came to the fire and sat, and she handed him a clay cup of the hot drink without comment, and they sat together in the roofless shelter with the smoke rising up into the pale sky. "I need to tell you something," she said. He waited. "I was at Fort Ashfin because I heard it was being resettled." She looked at the fire. "My clan held the valley approach before the war. My grandmother's grandmother built the first watch post on the eastern ridge." A pause. "Most of the clan is in the crags now. The old territory is gone, but I wanted to see it again. I wanted to make the maps. I wanted someone to know the orc names for the passes before they were all replaced with cavalry names." He thought about that, about the quiet fierceness of a woman mapping a territory that had been taken from her people, recording the names of things so they would not be forgotten. "Did Captain Yold know?" he said. "She knew I had clan ties to the area." She did not ask for details, and I did not offer them. She looked at him. "She is a fair woman." "She is," he agreed. "The bounty from Fossick is not the only thing that would follow me back to a court," Ugak said. Her voice was even. "An orc woman on former clan land with a blade and a price on her head, they would find more to charge me with if they wanted to. The resettlement charter gives humans priority land claim. I had no legal standing to be there at all." He sat with that for a moment. The complexity of it, the weight of it, the way the law arranged itself to make certain people permanently wrong, no matter what they did or didn't do. "So the North Crags," he said. "Back to the clan." "My clan does not need another mouth. They are not starving, but they are not prosperous." She turned the cup in her hands. "I thought if I could work the map contract, establish a record of the pass routes, build something like a standing in the resettlement, I thought maybe there was a way to stay, to bring some of the clan south, to reclaim at least a piece of it through legitimate means." "That's a long road," he said. "Yes," she said, "it is. But a good one." She looked at him, and the amber eyes held something he had not seen in them before, not wariness, not challenge, but something more careful and more open, like a door that has been closed for a long time and is not yet sure whether the hinge will hold. "You are a strange man, Elias Dawson," she said. "I've heard that," he said. "You are kind in a way that does not seem to cost you anything. Most people's kindness costs them, and they want you to know it." He thought about that. "Mine probably costs me," he said. "I just don't count it." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she set her cup down, leaned forward, and kissed him. It was not a tentative kiss. It was not an exploratory or uncertain thing. She kissed him with the same direct, unhesitating quality she brought to everything. A firm, warm pressure, her hand coming up to the side of his jaw, and he felt the slight edge of her lower tusk against his lip, and it was strange and real and undeniably, urgently right. He kissed her back with all the suppressed warmth of 6 weeks of careful distance, and when they pulled back, both of them were very still for a moment, the fire crackling between its stones, the smoke rising, the world outside the roofless walls very large and very quiet. "You were thinking about doing that," he said. "I was thinking about it for 2 weeks," she said, with a frankness that made him want to laugh and also made something in him go warm and steady as a banked coal. "You could have," he said. "I would not have objected." "I know that now," she said. And then, in the same measured, deliberate way she had first said it in the mud of the courtyard, she said, "Thank you." He understood she did not mean thank you for the kiss. He looked at her and nodded. They stayed in the shelter until the short winter afternoon dimmed toward dark, talking in the way they had been talking for 3 weeks, but with something unlocked now, something that moved more freely. She told him about the orc counting custom, the way a warrior woman of her clan established a claim not through ceremony or announcement, but through an act of open choosing, a public and deliberate acknowledgement that made the bond real in the eyes of the community. She told him about it matter-of-factly, the way she told him most things, and he listened the way he listened to most things she said, with his full attention, which was perhaps the thing she had trusted first about him. "Is that what this is?" he said. "A claiming?" "Not yet," she said. The amber eyes were steady on his. "A claiming requires witnesses." He thought about that and found, somewhat to his own surprise, that he was not unsettled by it. They rode east for 3 more days, keeping off the main roads, moving through the old veldt farmland and then up into a stretch of low, forested hill country where the holdings were sparse and the people sparse with them. They slept in turns at wayfarer shelters or against the sheltered sides of large boulders, sharing the blanket from his pack and the heavier fur from hers, close enough for warmth, closer than warmth required by the end of the second night. On the third morning he woke to find her sitting with her back against a boulder watching the road below, and she was utterly still and utterly alert, and utterly the most capable person he had ever shared a blanket with. And he lay there for a moment in the cold morning, and felt a depth of wanting that was not only physical. Though it was that too. It was the wanting of a man who has been alone in the ways that really matter for a long time, and who has found, impossibly, in the most improbable of circumstances, in mud and horses and mountain passes and roofless shelters, a person who makes the world the right size again. On the 4th day they reached the town of Veldt Cross, which was a real town, a walled market town at the crossing of 2 trade roads, with a garrison, a charter court, an inn, and a population large enough that 2 travelers arriving did not immediately attract notice. They would have been fine if not for the garrison post notice board, and if not for the bounty guild's reach. Elias saw it first, a fresh notice, cleaner and more formal than the muddy parchment at the fort, tacked to the garrison board with 3 iron nails. He read it quickly and then steered Birch to block Ugak's view of the board, which was pointless because she had already read it past his shoulder. 30 crowns is 30 crowns, she said. We need to get out of the market. We need to get to the charter court first, she said. He looked at her. If I run every time there is a notice, I will run forever. I need to file a counterstatement. Cressmere's bounty charter is a guild charter, not a crown charter. In a town with its own court, I have the right to file a statement before arrest. Do you know that for certain? I know the Ironwall Resettlement Charter gives provisional legal standing to orc workers employed by Crown-sanctioned operations, she said. Captain Yold's contract was Crown-sanctioned. That gives me provisional standing for 30 days from the date of employment. She looked at him levelly. I have 19 days remaining. He stared at her. You worked this out. I have had 3 weeks to work things out, she said with a precision that was absolutely her. The farrier who knew a northern pass route was a useful development, but I was already planning. He almost laughed. All right, he said. Charter Court, let's go. The Veldt Cross Charter Court was a stone building near the garrison, staffed by a court recorder named Penn Hadley, a thin, ink-stained man in his 40s who looked at Ugak with the practiced blankness of someone who had learned not to show his first reaction to unusual situations. Elias stood at Ugak's side while she stated her case, clearly, precisely, with the same quality of deliberate precision that she brought to her maps, and Penn Hadley wrote every word down without comment. When she finished, Hadley read the statement back, made 2 small corrections at her direction, and then said, carefully, the statement will be entered into the Veldt Cross Court record. A copy will be transmitted to the Ironwall Central Court. Under provisional standing rules, you cannot be seized under a guild bounty while the counterstatement is under review. Review typically takes, how long? Elias said. 4 to 6 weeks, Hadley said. Ugak and Elias looked at each other. Her provisional standing had 19 days. Then we need to get Captain Yold to extend the contract, Elias said. Or get the case reviewed faster, Ugak said. She looked at Hadley. Is there a way to request expedited review on grounds of exceptional circumstances? Hadley pushed his glasses up. There is. It requires a character attestation from a Crown-employed individual. He looked at Elias' leather apron, his horseshoe-marked hands. A Crown-contracted farrier would qualify. Elias picked up the pen. He signed the attestation. He wrote 3 sentences about Ugak Gorehorn's service at Fort Ashfin, her quality of work, and his personal knowledge of her character over 6 weeks of proximity. He wrote them in the plain, direct language of a man who meant every word, and Hadley sealed the document and promised the express rider would have it to the Ironwall Central Court by the following morning. When they walked out of the charter court and into the cold market-town air, Ugak stopped on the steps and stood very still for a moment. "You just put your name on a legal document on my behalf," she said. "I did. That is not a small thing." "No," he agreed. She turned and looked at him with the full force of those amber eyes, and he met her gaze and did not look away. And the moment stretched between them on the charter court steps in the pale afternoon light of Velt Cross. People moving in the market square below, a horse whinnying somewhere in the distance, the world going on around them with complete indifference to the fact that something significant was happening in the space between 2 people on a set of stone steps. "You are a very strange man," she said again, but this time her voice was different, warmer, the way stone feels when the sun has been on it. "You keep saying that," he said. "I keep meaning it differently," she said. They found an inn. The Velt Cross Inn was plain and clean, and did not make a fuss about the green-skinned woman at the door, because Velt Cross was a trade town and had learned what made good business. And they ate a hot meal and they talked long into the evening, and then they climbed the stairs together in the way of people who have already made a decision and do not need to state it aloud. The room was small, and the fire was good, and the bed was narrow by the standards of 2 people, neither of whom was small. And Elias Dawson, who had been alone in the ways that really matter for a very long time, held Ugak Gorehorn in the firelight of a room in a trade town on the edge of the map, and she was fierce and warm and demanding and real against him, and he gave her everything he had to give, which was not a fortune or a title or a great name, but was steady and sure and genuinely meant, which, he suspected, was exactly what she needed, and exactly what she had never had enough of. They lay quiet afterward in the warm dark, her head on his chest, his hand in her loose hair, the bone pin on the floor with their boots and her weapons and his apron, and she said, "I do not do this lightly." "I know," he said. "You understand what it means in my custom." "I think so," he said. "Tell me anyway. When a woman of my clan takes a man to her side, she is not trying him. She has already decided." A pause. "There is no taking it back." He was quiet for a moment, thinking about that, the weight of it, the absoluteness of it, the way it asked for no qualification or escape route. "Good," he said. She was still for a breath. Then her arm tightened slightly around him. "Good," she echoed, and the word was low and sure and everything. In the morning there was trouble. The bounty man's name was Creed, and he had not come through the North Pass. He had come through Velt Cross because he was not one of the 3 who had shown up at Fort Ashfin. He was the 4th man, the one who had been tracking the southern approach while the others went north, and he had arrived in Velt Cross the same evening they had, though on a different road. He had seen the inn records at the garrison post, and he had seen Elias' name on the charter court ledger, and he had put things together with the efficiency of a man who had been doing this work for a long time. He was waiting in the inn's common room at dawn when they came downstairs, and he was not alone. He had 2 local garrison deputies with him, men who were not bounty men but who understood the weight of a guild charter, and he had a set of iron cuffs on the table in front of him, and he had the look of a man who had already had the conversation in his head and was only performing the formality of having it in person. "Ugak Gorehorn," he said. "By authority of the Cressmere Merchants Guild Bounty Charter, I am placing you under arrest pending transport to—" "She has filed a counterstatement," Elias said, stepping forward. "A charter court counterstatement, filed last afternoon with Recorder Penn Hadley. Under provisional Crown employment standing, she cannot be seized while the counterstatement is under review. Creed looked at him with the flat patience of a man who had heard this before. The provisional standing requires active Crown employment. The Ashfin contract ended the moment she left the resettlement. The contract has not been formally terminated, Ugak said. I have not received a termination notice. I have one, Creed said, and produced a parchment. Signed this morning by Garrison Commander Aldrich of Velt Cross, acting in temporary authority. He set it on the table. The Ironwall Cavalry deferred. The Guild Charter supersedes. Elias read the parchment. He read it twice. The ink was fresh. The signature was real. He felt the cold certainty of it, the way the law arranged itself, the way authority slid and shifted to put certain people permanently in the wrong. And there was a burning somewhere under his sternum that he had not felt in years, a clean, cold anger that had nothing theatrical in it, just the direct, stripped-down response of a man watching something unjust happen in front of him. He looked at the two garrison deputies. Young men, uncomfortable, aware this was not a clean situation. This, he said, keeping his voice level, is a fabricated countercharge. There were 4 witnesses to the incident with Fossick. 3 were relocated by Fossick himself after the incident, which is itself a violation of the anti-retaliation clauses in the Ironwall Labor Code. The 4th died of fever. Without witnesses, this is one merchant's word against hers, and one merchant's guild has no authority to supersede a Crown Court counterstatement filed in good faith by a Crown-employed worker. He set his hands on the table and looked at Creed. You know this. Creed looked at him. You're a farrier. I can read. Step back, Dawson. I won't. For a moment the common room was very still. The innkeeper had gone to the far end of the room. The 2 garrison deputies were looking at each other. Creed's hand moved toward the cuffs on the table. What happened next happened very fast. One of the garrison deputies moved to take Ugak's arm, a reaching motion, not yet a grip, and she stepped back and the motion of the common room changed. A sharpening, a tipping of balance, and through the inn window Elias could see that there were more people outside, 3 or 4 of them, and one of them had a rope. Not a restraint rope. A hanging rope with the noose already tied, because someone in Velt Cross had decided that a 30-crown orc fugitive was easier to deal with as a dead orc fugitive, and had made arrangements overnight that the garrison deputies apparently did or did not know about. And either way it didn't matter, because the door of the inn opened and 2 men came in from outside, and one of them was holding the rope, and one of them was holding a short knife, and the knife was the more immediate problem. Elias moved. He was not a soldier. He had never been a soldier. He was a farrier, which meant he was strong in the back and shoulders, accustomed to managing large animals that didn't want to be managed, and accustomed to working fast in tight spaces. He put himself between Ugak and the knife man in one motion, getting his shoulder into the man's chest before the knife arm had come fully forward, and drove him back into the doorframe with a crack that made the whole inn shake. The knife clattered on the floor. The rope man hesitated. Ropes are poor weapons against standing people, and in that hesitation, Ugak moved. She moved like a storm moving. In the 2 seconds that Elias had bought her, she had her long blade off her back, not drawn to cut but laid flat and cold and absolutely certain against the rope man's throat, and the room went completely, utterly still. "Put it down," she said to the rope man, and her voice was not loud. It was the voice of a person who does not need volume because there is no possible world in which they are not serious. The rope hit the floor. Creed had half risen. The garrison deputies were frozen. The knife man was pinned against the doorframe by Elias' forearm and was not in a position to do anything. "Now," Ugak said, still not loud, "you will escort me and my companion to the charter court, and you will explain to Penn Hadley exactly what a hanging rope was doing in the hands of a civilian outside this inn while a bounty arrest was being executed, and you will do it while I can still hold my temper." She pulled the blade back. The rope man breathed. Creed looked at her and then at the garrison deputies and then at the rope on the floor, and whatever calculation he had been running in his head reached a new conclusion. "Fine," he said, through his teeth. They went to the charter court. What followed was 2 hours of the most precise and careful legal argument Elias had ever witnessed, conducted by a woman who had clearly spent a significant portion of 3 weeks not just thinking about past roots, but memorizing the relevant passages of the Iron Wall Resettlement Charter. Ugak argued her case with the same quality she brought to her maps: thorough, exact, without heat or dramatics, only the clean architecture of fact. Penn Hadley recorded everything. The hanging rope was noted in the record. Creed's authorization of the civilian mob was noted in the record. The fresh signature on the termination notice was compared against the garrison commander's recorded signatures and found to be inconsistent in 2 letters. At the end of 2 hours, Penn Hadley removed his glasses and set them on the desk and said, "In the matter of the Cressmere Guild bounty on one Ugak Gorehorn, I am issuing a Velt Cross provisional stay of seizure pending transmission to the Iron Wall Central Court on grounds of irregularity in the arrest procedure." This stay covers a period of 60 days. He looked at Creed. The bounty man, Creed, is advised that any further attempt to seize the named individual during the stay period will constitute a violation of the counterstatement protections and expose the Cressmere Guild to a significant financial liability. Creed stood and left without speaking. In the corridor outside the court chamber, Ugak stopped and leaned against the stone wall and closed her eyes for a moment. Just a moment. The kind of moment a person allows themselves when they have been holding themselves at full tension for too long, and the tension has released enough to notice. Elias stood beside her. He did not fill the silence with unnecessary words. After a moment she opened her eyes and looked at him. "You stepped in front of that knife," she said. "You had a blade to a rope man's throat at the same time," he said. "That is not the same thing." "Isn't it?" She looked at him for a long time. "No," she said quietly, "it is not. You are not a warrior. That was not your fight, and you stepped in front of it." "It was my fight," he said simply. "You are my fight." The amber eyes were very still. "Elias." "You said there's no taking it back," he said. "That goes both ways." She looked at him with an expression that was too many things at once for him to name all of them. Something fierce and something raw and something that was nothing other than love, the plain and unambiguous kind, the kind that does not require ceremony or announcement. "Yes," she said, "it does." They stayed 3 more days in Velt Cross while the express rider made the round trip to the Iron Wall Central Court. The response came back faster than expected, 4 days instead of 6, because Captain Myra Yold had, apparently, anticipated the situation and sent her own statement the morning after Elias and Ugak had left Fort Ashfin, a statement that was thorough and direct, and used words like falsified and irregular that carried significant weight in a Crown court. The Iron Wall Central Court ruling was brief. The Cressmere Guild bounty was suspended pending a full re-examination of the Fossick incident, with a request issued to the Eastern Territorial Authority for the 3 relocated witnesses to be found and interviewed. The provisional standing of one Ugak Gorehorn under the Iron Wall Resettlement Charter was confirmed and extended to cover the full resettlement period. The mob and rope incident at Velt Cross was forwarded to the Garrison Oversight Board. Penn Hadley read the ruling aloud in the court chamber, in the presence of Elias, Ugak, the garrison commander, and 3 other court officials. When he finished, the garrison commander looked at Ugak with an expression that had some discomfort in it and some respect and very little that was entirely comfortable, and he said stiffly, "The garrison of Velt Cross acknowledges the ruling." Ugak inclined her head, one precise, measured motion, not submissive, not triumphant, the exact amount of acknowledgement that the moment required and no more. They rode back toward Fort Ashfin the same day. The road back was different from the road out, not the mountain pass, which Elias did not want to risk a second time, but the long Southern Valley road that had been clear of bounty men ever since they were presumably recalled. It was slower, easier, and felt, in the way of a journey taken on the far side of crisis, like something that belonged to them. They rode mostly side by side, which was not always possible on the narrow stretches but was possible on the valley road, and they talked with the ease of people who have been through something together and come out the other side. She told him more about her clan, the matriarch, her great-aunt Drova, a woman of terrifying authority and considerable warmth in private, the younger warriors who were restless in the crags and needed something to build toward, the way the clan's knowledge of the southern territories had been eroding with every generation that stayed in the high country. He told her about his parents, both dead, his father from a fever when Elias was 12, his mother from simple age when he was 23. He told her about the years of itinerant farrier work before Ashfeld, moving from contract to contract, never quite staying anywhere long enough to put down anything like roots. He told her about the particular quality of being a person who is useful and competent and unremarkable, the kind of person the world needs and does not notice. "I noticed," she said. "In a courtyard full of people you noticed the one who didn't laugh," he said, not bitterly but with the exact plainness of a man making an observation. "Yes," she said, "that is how I notice." He thought about that for a long time while Birch's hooves fell steady on the valley road. They arrived at Fort Ashfin on the 10th day after leaving it, riding through the gate, now fully rebuilt, arched stone with an iron portcullis in the late afternoon when the courtyard was full of the noise and movement of resettlement work. A mason looked up. A soldier at the gate post stiffened slightly. Several of the workers stopped what they were doing. Captain Myra Yold was crossing the courtyard with a sheaf of documents under her arm when she saw them, and she stopped and looked for a moment with an expression that was entirely unreadable, and then she came forward. "Dawson," she said. Horn, she looked between them. "I assume things were resolved." 60-day stay, Central Court ruling, Fossick inquiry opened, Ugak said. "Good." Yold looked at Elias. "Your horses missed you." "I'll get back to them," he said. Yold looked at both of them again with the same level, commander's gaze reading something, measuring something, and then she said, "Glad you're back," to neither of them specifically and both of them at once, and went on with her documents. Elias and Ugak looked at each other. "Home," she said quietly. It was the first time either of them had used the word. "Home," he agreed. The weeks that followed were the best weeks Elias Dawson had had in more years than he could honestly count. He went back to his horses, which had, as Yold said, missed him. Particularly the difficult red roan, and Ugak went back to her maps, and they worked through the days separately and came together at the evenings with the ease of people who have learned the shape of each other. He had a corner of the stable building that he had organized into a workable living space, a cot and a footlocker and a shelf with his tools. And after the first week back she began leaving things there, a folded map, the clay cups they had been sharing at the Wayfarer's shelter that she had apparently carried the whole way, a smaller pack that she moved from her own bunk in the scouts' quarters without announcement or ceremony, and which she did not comment on, and which he did not comment on, and which they both understood completely. She was impossible and wonderful in equal measure. She had opinions about the placement of the forge that she expressed directly and at length. She had absolutely no patience for the fort's supply officer, a man named Breck who kept charging two prices for the same goods depending on who was asking, and who she dealt with in a way that resolved the issue permanently and made the rest of the resettlement workers quietly grateful. She woke before dawn always and was already at her table with her maps and her small lamp when he stirred, and the sight of the lamp lit and the bent head and the careful scratching of a quill became the first good thing of every morning, as reliable and necessary as water. She was also, when the armor of her careful precision came down, warm in the most fundamental way, a warmth she distributed narrowly, like a lamp with a focused beam, so that when it fell on you it was undeniable. She was warm with the horses. She was warm with one of the younger masons, a 16-year-old girl named Seta who had come to the resettlement alone, and who Ugak tutored quietly in map reading on Sunday afternoons without ever calling it tutoring. She was warm with Elias with a completeness that she did not seem to manage with anyone else, a fullness of attention and ease that he suspected she had been saving for a long time. She was also, when the spirit moved her, incredibly funny, a dry, precise, devastating humor that landed without warning and left him helpless in the way that only truly unexpected laughter does. He had not laughed this much in years. He had not known he had been missing it this specifically, the combination of warmth and wit and challenge, of being known. The Fossick inquiry took 42 days. The 3 relocated workers, 2 orc men and 1 human woman who had been Fossick's clerk before the incident, were found in the Eastern Territories by the Crown investigator, and all 3 gave consistent accounts that matched Ugak's counterstatement in every significant detail. Fossick, faced with this, had revised his account to claim the incident had been a misunderstanding, which the court noted with the particular dryness that courts reserved for transparent retreats. The bounty was struck from the record. The Crestmere Guild was fined for the improper mob action at Velt Cross. Creed the bounty man lost his guild certification for a period of 1 year. The ruling arrived at Fort Ashfin by courier on a cold, clear morning in early winter, when the mountains were white, and the courtyard was busy with the work of preparing the fort for its first full winter as a functioning outpost. Ugak read the document standing at the gate, where the courier had caught her on her way out for a morning survey. Elias was watching from the stable doorway, unable to read the document from that distance but able to read her face. He saw the moment she read the relevant line. She did not move for a breath. Then she looked up from the document across the courtyard directly at him, and the amber eyes were very bright. He crossed the courtyard. "Done," he said. "Done," she said. He took her face in his hands and kissed her in the middle of the courtyard in the morning light, in front of every soldier and mason and trader and settler who happened to be there, which was most of them, because the fort was busy and the courtyard was busy, and there was no question that it was seen. There was a moment of stillness, the particular quality of a crowd that has been collectively surprised. Then one of the workers, the young mason's apprentice who had laughed the morning Ugak stumbled, who had in the intervening months been noticeably careful around her, who had been watching her with the uncertain guilt of a person who knows they behaved badly and hasn't yet found a way to acknowledge it, started to clap. A slow, single pair of hands. And then the mason next to him started, and then said of the young girl with her maps, and then the soldiers at the gate, and then more. Not a thunderous ovation, but a steady, warm, genuine sound that spread around the courtyard in the pale morning air. Ugak pulled back from the kiss and looked at him, and there was something in her expression that he knew he would carry for the rest of his life. The open, unguarded face of a woman who had been braced for the world to be unkind for so long that its kindness, when it came in full, landed like a first breath. "I believe that constitutes witnesses," he said quietly. She laughed the full, real laugh, the one that surprised itself out of her, the one that he had first heard on the granite shelf above the world, and pulled him close again. Captain Yold was standing on the step outside the command building with a cup of tea and the expression of a woman who had anticipated this and chosen to be outside to observe it. She took a sip of her tea. She said nothing, but when Ugak caught her eye over Elias' shoulder, Yold raised the cup slightly in a small, certain acknowledgement. The weeks that followed the ruling were the weeks in which Fort Ashfin stopped being a resettlement in progress and became, genuinely, a place. The walls were finished. The market square was open and trading. The garrison was established. The spring planting plans were being drawn up for the valley fields. Settlers were beginning to think about staying rather than passing through. Elias had been offered a permanent contract, head farrier for the Ashfin garrison and the civilian resettlement, a salary and a proper workshop in which was new, and which the fort's quartermaster had told him about with the slightly embarrassed directness of a man making an offer he suspects will be accepted. A set of rooms in the Eastern Barracks building, 2 rooms, enough for 2 people, with a proper fireplace. He had accepted before the quartermaster finished the sentence. Ugak's situation was more complex, but in the way of things that are complex because they are important rather than because they are intractable. With the bounty gone and the Ironwall Central Court's explicit confirmation of her provisional standing, she had standing legal, recorded standing at Fort Ashfin that she had not had before. She had also, in the course of her months of survey work, produced a set of maps of the Ashfin Valley and past territory that were recognized by the Ironwall Cartographic Office as the most complete and accurate survey of the region ever made. The Cartographic Office wanted more. The fort needed more. Captain Yold had proposed a formal chief scout position, a title and a salary, and crucially, a standing that extended to any clan member she brought south under the resettlement provisions. She had asked Elias what he thought, sitting across from him at the small table in their new rooms, the fireplace going, the clay cups between them, the bone pin holding her dark hair while her maps were spread across everything else. "I think you already know what you want," he said. "I am asking what you think," she said, with the precise emphasis of a woman who means the question differently from the way it might be taken, who is asking not for permission, but for the perspective of a person whose perspective has come to matter. He looked at her across the maps and the firelight. He thought about a morning 3 weeks ago when the first of her clan, a younger cousin named Vek, wary and hard-edged, who had looked at Elias with about the same suspicion Ugak had initially brought to everything, had arrived at the fort and been taken in hand by Ugak with a brisk, warm efficiency that had clearly been planned for long before the formal offer. He thought about the way the valley had looked the day they came back through the gate, with the mountains at its back and the open country south, how the view was one of those views that seemed to hold more space inside it than its physical dimensions could account for. "I think," he said, "that your grandmother's grandmother built the first watch post on the eastern ridge, and you just made the definitive map of the territory, and there is now a legal recorded document with a crown court stamp that says you have standing here." He met her eyes. "I think you already won. I think you should take the title, and I think you should bring your clan down from the crags, and I think I will be in the workshop at the end of the day when you come back from every survey." She looked at him for a long time. The amber eyes were warm and certain and full of the exact particular light that was only ever for him. "Elias Dawson," she said. "Ugak Gorehorn," he said. "You are the strangest man I have ever met." "Still," he said. "Always," she said. "That is not a complaint." She rose from the table and came around to his side and took his face in her hands, the large, capable, map-ink-stained hands that he had come to know as well as his own, and kissed him with the same unhesitating directness of the first time. And this time there was no surprise in it, no testing of a hinge that might not hold, only the warmth of a thing that had decided itself and held. 3 months later, on a clear spring morning when the valley was coming alive and the fort's market square was full and the mountains were losing their snow, Ugak Gorehorn was formally invested as chief scout of the Ashfin resettlement in a ceremony in the courtyard that Captain Yold conducted with military brevity, and the court recorder from Velt Cross, Penn Hadley, who had ridden up specially witnessed and stamped. Elias stood at her side through all of it, not behind her, not in front of her. At her side, which was exactly where he was supposed to be. Afterward, when the formalities were done and the courtyard had gone back to its regular noise, and the early spring sun was making the old stone walls glow, Drova, the clan matriarch, Ugak's grey-tanned, a woman of 70 winters who had come down from the crags for the ceremony, and who had been watching Elias since her arrival with the specific intensity of a woman taking the full measure of something important, came to stand in front of him. She was shorter than Ugak by 6 inches and more frightening by several magnitudes, and she looked at him for a long, silent moment. "You are the farrier," she said. "Yes," he said. "You signed your name on a court document for her." "Yes." "You stepped in front of a knife for her." "Yes." Drova was quiet. The amber eyes, older than Ugak's, deeper, carrying more weight, regarded him with an absolute steadiness. "My granddaughter's mother chose a man like you once," Drova said. "He did not last." "I know," Elias said. He had been told in the careful, matter-of-fact way that Ugak told him things. "I'm not trying to be him." "No," Drova said after a moment. "You are not." She held his gaze for another breath, and then she nodded, a single, precise motion, not unlike the one her great-niece made when a thing had been decided. "You will do," she said, and walked away. Elias stood in the courtyard with the spring sun on his face and let out a slow breath. Ugak appeared at his shoulder. She had seen. "What did she say to you?" she said. "That I will do," he said. She looked at Drova's retreating back, and something in her face softened in a way that was rare and real. "That is the highest praise she has given a man in 40 years, she said. "Good," he said. She slipped her hand into his. Not the brief, deliberate gesture of the first morning in the courtyard, but the easy, unconscious motion of a person reaching for the thing that is simply theirs. And they stood together in the sun while the fort worked around them. The sound of hammers and horses and trade, and the particular busy noise of a place being built into something lasting. That evening Vec, her young cousin, helped him move a heavy anvil block into the new workshop without being asked, and did it without the wariness of a few months prior, but with the straightforward ease of someone who has decided a person belongs. And that was enough, and everything was enough, and the world was exactly the right size. Later that night, in the two-room quarters with the good fireplace, Ugak spread her newest maps across the table and traced the eastern ridge with one finger, showing him where the clan's old summer routes used to run. And he leaned close and followed the lines, and they talked about the coming survey season, and the passes that still needed mapping, and the field she had her eye on for a proper stable yard expansion when the budget allowed. And the fire burned low and warm. And outside the fort walls the valley was deep and dark, and full of the particular sound of open country at night, which is the sound of space and time and the vast, unhurried world, and within it two people who had been alone in the ways that matter were no longer, and the warmth of that was not a small thing, was not a temporary thing, was not a careful or conditional or easily broken thing. It was the kept kind. On the wall above the fireplace, where Ugak had hung the bone pin from the night in Velt cross on a small iron hook, not because she needed it there, but because she wanted it there, a small, private marker of the night, a door open that had been closed for a long time. The fire's light caught it and threw a small, warm point of brightness across the stones. Elias Dawson, farrier, a decent and ordinary and deeply good man at the edge of a map that was still being made, looked at the woman across the table, fierce and warm and absolutely certain, the amber eyes tracking the route of an old summer road she was bringing back from memory into record, the quill moving in her capable ink-stained hand. And he thought about a courtyard in the mud, and a stumble and a laugh he had not laughed, and a pair of eyes that had come up slowly and found, against all expectation, a face that held nothing but good faith. "Thank you," she had said, 2 words spoken like something rare. He had not known that morning what they would grow into. He knew now. He reached across the table and set his hand over hers, a light, deliberate touch, over the maps and the lamplight and the whole long road of it, and she looked up from the ridgeline and met his eyes, and the amber in them was steady and warm and full of the particular absolute light that was only ever for him. "You should sleep," he said. "Survey starts at dawn." "I know when my survey starts," she said, with the precision and the warmth and the hint of dry amusement that was completely, wholly her. "I know you do," he said. She turned her hand over under his and laced her fingers through his, and they held like that for a moment, the map between them, the fire going, the fort quiet around them, the valley open and dark outside, the mountains at its back holding the sky, and the whole of it was exactly, precisely, entirely right.